how do you balance your time between like different projects? Especially for Elizabeth, you work on a Wingspan franchise
You
now
want to
with
know when the
multiple
next expansion's coming out?
I did not say that, but since you brought it
We were not
up,
going to ask.
you brought it up, so let's hear more about that.
Wingspan gives you an engine that you immediately run, and you run the whole engine, whereas Undergrove has that sort of puzzly spatial element where you're only doing a small thing on your turn, but you have to do it cognizant of what the next turn and the turn after might be. It would usually go, how's Wingspan going? Oh, have you seen this bird? And then, oh, have you seen this thing?
Hawk in my yard yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some debate over it because it's really hard to study, right? It's all underground.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to focus right down on this idea that you're placing the mushrooms and you're then interacting with them. The board is built communally, but as we saw in our game, the spots on the board are really competitive.
Yeah.
Puzzly.
Mm-hmm.
Addictive. Rewarding.
Hello there. Welcome to Tuck in Cash. Today we are going to talk about a game that you might like if you enjoy Wingspan, and the game is called Undergrove. And the game is currently on Kickstarter, so if you're interested, you may check out the link in the description. And what better way to learn more about this new game by hearing from the designers themselves. So joining us today, we have Elizabeth Hargrave and Mark Wootton. So welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely our pleasure. And before we start, let's not forget to introduce my co-host and fellow wingmate, Will, or you might know him as Flan from Winging It. And actually, all four of us just had a playthrough of the game, and the video will be posted on Winging It channel, so make sure you go check it out as well. And with that, let's get started. So Elizabeth and Mark, why don't you tell us more about the game?
So Undergrove is a game that's really about the fact that mushrooms and trees trade resources underground. So you're playing from the point of view of a tree, and you're putting your seedlings out into the world, trying to get them established. And wherever they have their roots on a mushroom tile, that gives you access to trade resources with that mushroom, and different mushrooms have different powers that you can access. And also, it gives you the potential to score points at the end of the game if you're able to get some carbon absorbed up onto that seedling by the end of the game.
Right, really, really interested to hear about that. And I mean, I want to know more about what made you decide to pick mushrooms as a theme for a board game.
So Mark and I know each other because we worked on Mariposas together. Mark's on staff at AEG, and so he was the developer on Mariposas, which they published, and we had a lot of fun on that, and decided we wanted to start from scratch on something. And we were actually kicking around a lot of ideas about like other great migrations that we could do. But then I mentioned that I had always wanted to do a game about this concept because I've been a mushroomer for 20 years. But I really thought that the mycorrhizal relationships, that trading relationship, would make a good game, right? Trading. And as soon as I suggested that, Mark was like, "Oh yeah, that's the one." Right? That's how I remember it.
No, it was just like that. I'd actually recently watched a documentary by Dame Judi Dench, who was talking about all the trees in her garden, I guess, and she had been talking about this idea that trees somehow communicate with each other through the mycorrhizal network, and I had literally, I think, watched it 2 days before Elizabeth was mentioned it, and so I was like, oh yeah, we have to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we chose to sort of represent this one particular aspect of the research, which was there is research that suggests that some of the carbon compounds that trees take find their way into the mycorrhizal network and can subsequently find their way into the offspring of trees that there's some sort of preferential kin selection going on there, and that these carbon compounds in some way help those seedlings establish. I've represented that correctly, right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, there's some debate over it because it's really hard to study, right? It's all underground. And you're pretty much destroying the organisms if you dig them up to look at what's happening. So the way that they've tested what Mark just described, right, is they put like bags over these trees and they inject radioactive carbon, and then they watch like where radioactive carbon ends up in the surrounding environment, and some of it ends up in other trees that are presumably linked through the mycorrhizal network. Some people argue it could be going through the soil, but there have been a bunch of different ways that people like try to test that out. And but it's all like actually still evolving science.
We're representing one small part of a still hotly debated topic.
I mean, that's very interesting. I mean, one thing is definitely clear that, both of you are pretty passionate about the topic, so it must be pretty gratifying to make a game about, with a theme that you both are very passionate about. With that say, I'm kind of curious, how long did it take, to design a whole game from the inception to now on Kickstarter? Maybe you can tell us more about like what are the most challenging part during the whole designing process.
So it's been, I would say, just over 2.5 years. We were talking about this early 2021. I think the conversation Elizabeth was referring to where we decided what we were going to do was early 2021. So from there to here, 2.5 years, maybe just over 2.5 years. The challenges have been numerous, not least of which the one we just spoke about, in the sense that we had this idea that we wanted to portray this trading relationship, but the science is not 100% on this. So we essentially made some decisions that we were going to portray the one element of it. And even that was difficult. We had a number of different ideas. I mean, lots and lots of different ideas. We had people playing as different tree species. That led to us having trees with asymmetric powers. We had trees that could essentially build up their own little engine as a tree, so that every tree did that differently. We had different ways of representing the way the carbon moves through the system. We put various things in, took them out again, then went back to them. The goals that we've got in there, one point we had goals, as Elizabeth was talking about when we were playing, we had end of round goals. Then we did away with the rounds. So then we took the goals out and then we put them back in a different form, and that didn't work. So we took them out again, and then they came back in the form that you're seeing them now. I think really the decision was that the most fun was in the way that the forest, as we call it, which is where the mushrooms and seedlings are placed, the way that evolved was the most fun part of the game. And it's very easy to put too many things into a game because you like all of the different things, but what you want is to have something where people can focus on the fun. And so we wanted to focus right down on this idea that you're placing the mushrooms and you're then interacting with them. The board is built communally, but as we saw in our game, the spots on the board are really competitive.
It's definitely interesting to hear about the changes that are made. I think, as a board game player, you often just see that final product and think that it's just been something that's been sort of linearly built over time, but definitely seems like that's not the case. I mean, I'm interested to hear like how many of those changes come about just from your own sort of experience working with the game, and how much does it come from playtesting with other people and kind of getting that communal input into a game like this?
We were playtesting together every week on Tabletop Simulator, and then most weeks we were each also playtesting at home with other people in person. And that's really my process. It's like I can't see it in my head. I gotta get it on the table, and Mark can think through things. It's been interesting to work together because I'm always like, you know, if we're like, oh, what should we do? What should we do? I'm like, well, let's just try one. And Mark will be like, you know, thinking out 20 turns in his head and how many resources like result from it all. But yeah, so for me, it's all about the playtesting.
And you have to take that thing of seeing the game the way other people see it when they play it for the first or second or third time.
Sure.
Because, you know, after you've played a game 100 times, you have definitely lost the capacity to see it through the eyes of a new person. So you constantly have to go back and play with new people. I mean, we were very lucky. Not only did we have our own groups to play with, we had the developers at AG to play with on a very consistent basis. So we were able with them to not only go through new ideas, but to see how the game changes affected people who were experienced with the game. But then AG also has a great group of volunteers who will come in and play the game essentially like new players. So we were able to also access those people and play with them on TTS. So I think the process was very much play with experienced players in the development team, really refine it, and then take it out to some new players, wherever that was, then come back and refine it again, then take it out to new players again. So you're constantly moving between very experienced and completely new. And both of those groups of people can really change what you're going to do. The way we absorb carbon at the end was largely Elizabeth went to, I think it was one of the conventions you went to, Elizabeth, or the gathering or something, but Elizabeth went somewhere and said, look, it's not that this is difficult. I'm just finding it difficult to explain to people how this works. So
there was one version that I definitely, like, the minute I tried to explain it to someone else, I was like, this cannot be the rule. This can't be the rule. Even though it made perfect sense to us, having been through multiple iterations of like where it ended up, and we had fixed all the problems by adding this and taking, you know, but no.
I think it was as quick as that, and it went from this is the finest pinnacle of how this thing is going to work, and we know it's all balanced, and we've played it with experienced players, and it's finally perfect. It more or less went within one session to no, we just can't do this because you can't explain this. There's nothing wrong with the rule. It's just that people will get it wrong all the time because of the way it works. And it's amazing how the process can get you like that.
That's definitely very interesting to hear, you know, as a pure consumer of board game. Like, it's interesting to see like that's so much up and downs behind the game design, and so many iterations to bring to the final product. So yeah, that's definitely very interesting. And you know, I know this is not the first time two of you have worked together on a game. So both of you have worked on Mariposas before. So I guess, like, how does it feel to work together again? You know, what are the benefits or challenges of co-designing a game together?
This was definitely a much more intense experience, partly because it was from scratch, but partly also for the time that Mariposas was in development was the year that Wingspan was going crazy in 2019. So for a good chunk of that year, I just sort of said, like, you guys run with this and check in with me every now and then. So, and I felt comfortable doing that because Mark and I clicked pretty quickly, right? And so I sort of trusted him to work on it. But this was much more like every week doing whole play tests and spending hours on Slack just like hammering this stuff out, which is great. That's why I'm a game designer. I enjoy that process, but it's a lot of time.
Yeah, I would say that working together wasn't a challenge at all. Actually, I think working together was the opposite. It was fantastic. I certainly wouldn't have brought this to the table like this if I'd been working on my own. So I've only got positives to say about working together. And honestly, I mean, we did this because we wanted to work together. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, really. It was not an excuse to work together, but we had fun working on Mariposas. We have so many common interests, and yeah, both in terms of gaming and nature and all sorts of things. I mean, during, I think Elizabeth said this on one of the design diaries she posted somewhere, but I mean, when we were working on Mariposas, we signed Mariposas before Wingspan became a big deal. But Wingspan was becoming a big deal as we were working on Mariposas. And so we would start off the Mariposas development sessions. I'd ask Elizabeth something about what was happening now with Wingspan because it was all going crazy.
Yeah.
And then we'd talk about our birding lists and when we'd been out birding.
Yeah.
And it would be 20 minutes before we actually talked about Mariposas at all, because we would be it would usually go, how's Wingspan going? Oh, have you seen this bird? And then, oh, have you seen this thing?
Hawk in my yard yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this thing that happened. And so, we just had that sort of common interest and we had fun working together. So the working together was not a challenge. And I think the other thing I'm going to say is the fact that we work differently is also good. That Elizabeth's thing of I have to get it on the table is great, because people like me will want to think things through, as she says. But I guess from Elizabeth's perspective, hopefully having somebody who says, well, what about this? Oh, but hang on, what about this? That's a counterbalance as well. And as long as you get on, working differently is really good. Because you cover each other's blind spots to an extent, right?
Sounds like you each complement each other, and I found your challenges. You two are having too much fun. So
yeah, sounds like a lot of fun, for sure. But of course, Elizabeth, you've also had some other recent games, the Fox Experiment being one of the more recent ones, which also went through Kickstarter. So I'm kind of interested to hear, what makes you decide to go through Kickstarter with a game like this. Is that a decision made by you, or is it the publishing company? And what kind of lessons, I guess, can you learn from this kind of experience?
Yeah, it's all up to the publisher on that. I mean, but I don't mind doing it. I find Kickstarters kind of fun to get a chance to interact with everyone in the comments and to kind of build up the excitement a little bit around things and to be able to add some of the stretch goals, maybe, or like the deluxe version that's never going to be financially viable in retail, but you can kind of afford to do it with Kickstarter. I think, publishers do it for all of those reasons. It's sort of its own marketing channel at this point because so many people just follow Kickstarter, but it also, because they get like 95% of the money that goes into the Kickstarter, it's much better than the profit margin that they make when they're selling to wholesale and to retail. So it's I totally get why they want to do it, and it sort of helps them predict how many copies to print too, which can go disastrously wrong in both directions, right? Like Wingspan couldn't catch up with demand for the whole first year because they printed too few, and then there are cases where publishers, if they print too many, they've like sunk all that money into the printing costs and then have to sell it, at cost or less than cost, or they're paying for warehousing. So it can be disastrous to print too many too.
Yeah, and I mean the Wingspan is a great example, right? Because Wingspan didn't suffer for this, but some games where a publisher's not printed enough, the sort of the bubble can burst almost. The next, because there's so many games coming out, the next new big thing can come out before your game has got traction. Now, fortunately, that didn't happen with Wingspan. But it is really difficult for publishers because, as Elizabeth says, if you overprint, you've spent a lot of money, which you're not recouping. You're paying for warehousing and so on. So kickstarting a game and being able to have a much better understanding of what that initial print number should likely be is actually really helpful to a publisher.
Yeah.
You know, if people have bought it on Kickstarter and they're loving it, it's pre-marketing for a game that you otherwise don't get. So and the deluxe version that Elizabeth spoke about is absolutely not to be underestimated. I mean, there are so many ways to bling up your game after it's gone to retail. But clearly you can see there is a demand there from people. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you know, my Wingspan's got all the wood inserts. And,
Oh yeah. Tell me about it.
You know, yeah.
Hard to resist.
I've absolutely done that. Yeah, it's hard to resist. I've done that for, you know, a couple of my favorite games. I did it for Terraforming Mars as well, right? And so what Kickstarter does is it gives you that opportunity of saying, well, you know, what would the fancy version look like?
Yeah.
And in a way that you just can't do with a retail release.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a consumer perspective, I definitely appreciate, you know, all the additional information you can find on the Kickstarter page, like, you know, the graphic, the art style, even just also the rule books. So you get to know, like, if that's a game that you enjoy. And looks like there's also option to play test the game on Tabletop Simulator as well. So that help people to make an informed decision. I really like that. With that say, I know both of you, you know, work on multiple games. How do you balance your time between like different projects? Especially for Elizabeth, you know, you work on a Wingspan franchise now with multiple
expansions coming out.
I did not say that, but since you brought it up, you brought it up, so let's hear more about that.
So it's interesting because if you talk to different designers, they work very differently. There are people who have like 10 active designs at once, and I am not that person. Like, I am very much like, my head is into one thing, and I just find the cost of like switching gears too high.
Yeah.
That said, I have started picking the birds for the next expansion. I'm not allowed to say what it is.
All right.
But I've started that, and that process is like a good chunk of the development time for an expansion is just like gathering the information I need to pick the birds, like, so all the habitat and food and nest and all of that, you know, wingspans and all of that, like, goes into my selection process because I want to have birds sort of distributed evenly across the different habitats, and I want the food to roughly match the distribution on the dice and things like that. So it's a very, like, I don't know, probably someone could program an AI to pick them for me, but I do it all by hand. I mean, there's an interesting optimization puzzle in there that I'm sure computers could do better than humans, but I haven't gone that route yet because I only have a few more to do. But yeah, I really didn't start working on that until Undergrove was pretty stable.
Okay.
And not taking up as much of my brain.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's, you know, honestly, as someone who's making a living at this, it's sort of a luxury to be able to go that slowly in one game at a time, because I think a lot of people who are trying to do game design full time, like, they need a bunch of games,
multiple projects ongoing.
Yeah, and Wingspan is just really nice that way, that I don't have to worry as much about it.
What about you,
So
Mark?
thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
I suppose by nature I end up working on multiple games because of the development role I have with AEG. So I worked with colleague Josh Woods on the game he did for Kickstarter, Let's Go to Japan, in the spring, which was a very successful Kickstarter. I work with Kirk Wickendorf and John Goodenough on the games that they're currently working on. We've worked on Dead Reckoning, which is a pirate game Kickstarter that we did. So I do end up working on multiple games at any given time. I even occasionally try and pry information out of Elizabeth about what the next Wingspan expansion is going to be as well.
Please tell us when you
But
find
I don't
out.
really have any more.
Yeah.
I don't have any more luck than you guys so far. But
Yeah.
if I do get the inside scoop,
keep trying.
Yeah.
That's not entirely true.
But you see, now they're going to put pressure on me, Elizabeth. I'm just trying to play the I don't know anything card, right?
Yeah.
But I think to what Elizabeth says is, I am a great believer. You cannot multitask. Multitasking is just not a thing. So I very much try to either have half a day or a day focused on a particular thing that I'm doing, or a particular game, or working with one of my colleagues. You know, the three people I named have put a huge amount of work into Undergrove. You know, I'm sure Elizabeth would concur. Huge amount, and as did the other developer who used to be with AG, Neil Kimball. So a huge thank you to them. And so I reciprocate when they're working on something, and you know, try and put time back into that. Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say.
Yeah.
So. But yes, you do have to be able to sort of partition that, because if your brain ends up going in too many different directions, it can be very, very challenging.
Yeah. These are all complex game after all, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And there you go. We're learning a little bit more about maybe what the next Wingspan expansion is going to look like. A little bit. I mean, obviously, one of the things that I really, really enjoy about Wingspan is the quality of the artwork. I notice you've got Beth Sobel on board again here for Undergrove. She also illustrated one of my other favourite games, Cascadia, which has got amazing artwork. So, yeah, just want to hear from you both. Kind of what priority do you put on having that, you know, level of really good artwork in your games?
I think it can make all the difference. I mean, there are people who don't care, but for me, the art makes a huge difference in my enjoyment of the game. I had actually been talking on social media about the fact that I was working on a mushroom game, and Beth reached out to me and said she wanted to illustrate it.
That's cool.
And I instantly reached out to AEG and was like, Beth Sobel wants to do it. And it was so funny to see them message each other, because Josh at AEG sounded like he felt like he had to convince Beth to do it, and Beth sounded like she felt like she had to convince Josh to do it. And
there you go.
Like, no, you guys, we're done. It's
meant
happening.
to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we'd obviously.
I'm just thrilled because I love her work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cascadia was obviously originally, it's a flat out game, but AG has published it. So you know, we were very familiar with Beth's work and how good it is. And I am absolutely thrilled that she's done the artwork. I think, you know, when you look at the mushrooms, they look really, really good, and that's important, because I mean, one of the early decisions, I mean, you know, we've almost come back full circle, but one of the early decisions that we made when we were thinking about the game is, do we want the players being a mushroom that's having a relationship with the trees of the forest, or do we want the players to be the tree that's having a relationship with all the mushrooms? And one of the reasons we picked it this way round was because we felt the mushroom art would be colorful, and so having a one-to-many relationship with tree to mushroom meant we could showcase the mushrooms visually. So I mean, that was actually a real part of the decision, because you don't want to just think about the game, you want to think about the product. And so as soon as you make the decision that you want to showcase the mushrooms visually, then have somebody like Beth come on and do the art, just starts to make absolute perfect sense.
Yeah, that's a perfect partnering there. Certainly when I was playing the game, I was definitely very drawn to all the beautiful artwork, and just learning about different shape of mushroom that, you know, I've just never seen or never imagined exists out there. So that was really good. I guess one more question, you know, for people who are curious about the game, who want to try the game or thinking about backing the game, you know, who do you think will enjoy this game the most, and what would you say to them?
When we were working on it, we always sort of said we wanted to aim for like people who've been playing Wingspan and maybe they're ready for that level of complexity, maybe a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when we were pretty close to the end, we started asking the playtesters whether they thought it was more or less complex than Wingspan.
Uh-huh.
And people were split.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. I think it's a little bit hard to judge when you've played as much Wingspan as you guys have, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think there's multiple things going on there. I think number one, people play Wingspan at different levels of complexity in a way. Like you can take it more or less seriously and think harder about your decisions. So I think that might be part of that, of like, oh, I just play Wingspan for the pretty birds and I'm not thinking that hard, and so this feels way harder, right? Versus people that are like really like analyzing every turn of Wingspan, and then maybe this feels similar or even a little easier. But I think also it has to do with how different the gameplay is, and like what's your personal comfort level with that like massive engine building of Wingspan versus the like spatial puzzle and the race that's part of Undergrove, and like the resource management is very different. And so I think part of it's just like what's your personal comfort level with the very different mechanics between the two. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think, having played your first game now.
Well, one thing I really enjoy, about Undergrove is that you see some similarity between that and Wingspan. You have different mushroom, you have different birds, and then you have the end of round goals. But I think Undergrove is really unique in the sense that the game feel a little bit more 3D, because you have like different layers, right? You have like placing of the seeding, the roots, and then you have growing a tree upwards, and there's a lot more movement. So I like that element that Undergrove brings to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the moments that really made me feel like it was similar to playing Wingspan was when Mark was kind of talking through his turns. He's thinking, okay, I'm going to do this on this turn, and then I can flip over this token, and then I can activate this mushroom. There is that element of planning your turns ahead, and you're not necessarily building your own sort of tableau, your own engine, but you are sort of building your engine in this area that you're controlling, and which mushrooms you can connect to. So I definitely got some similar feelings playing Undergrove to Wingspan, and in terms of how complex it is quite hard to say. I'd probably put them in the same sort of area, to be honest. But definitely a good first experience.
My feeling is that it's a little bit how your brain works, right? My wife finds engine building games more challenging than puzzly spatial games. So she will tell me that Wingspan is a more difficult game for her to play than Undergrove. I think, because I'm actually the only person here who's, well, I say I'm the only person here. No, that's not true. I play a lot of Wingspan. A lot of Wingspan.
So do we.
Elizabeth has to spend all the time designing, but I play a lot of Wingspan. So outside of Elizabeth, though, the three of us, I play Wingspan almost every night. And I would say that at their core, they are both action efficiency games. But the Wingspan gives you an engine that you immediately run, and you run the whole engine, whereas Undergrove has that sort of puzzly spatial element where you're only doing a small thing on your turn, but you have to do it cognizant of what the next turn and the turn after might be. So, and this is very hard to get on TTS, but what I will find when I play Undergrove in person is I'm looking around the table going, well, what resources have they got? Can they reproduce next turn? Because that thing where Elizabeth jumped in and got a second seedling on the big mushroom, when I play in person, I don't let that happen, because I'm looking going, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to play this differently. I'm going to gather the resources so that I can play two seedlings one after the other, rather than have to do something in between turns. So it's got that, to me, it's got much more of that puzzly spatial element. And I think it depends what you like. But going back to what Elizabeth started with, yes, we we kept asking people and we kept getting different answers. So every time I ask, I say, I think it's about the same complexity.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, somewhere in the same ballpark. Yeah.
right. Yeah. From what I hear, it seems like it is at the sweet spot where, if you're new to board game, you just enjoy the artwork and, want to try a new board game, you can still easily get into that because the rules are not too complex. But if you're a hardcore gamer like Mark and you want to play at the competitive level, that's certainly, the depth that the game offers as well. So, and before we wrap up the interview, we have a couple lightning round questions for both of you. So are you ready for that?
All right.
All right. Don't be scared.
Ready as we'll ever be.
All right. They're pretty harmless questions. So first question, what's your favorite mushroom?
My favorite mushroom, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. My favorite mushroom is the bluet, which is a mushroom I used to find. I worked for 30 years as a ranger in the UK, and we used to take people on fungal forays and fungal exploration walks. And the first job I had, there was a wood there that always had lots of wood bluets in it. So it has a great nostalgia value for me, and it's very tasty.
Yeah, very cool.
And pretty.
Yeah.
For blue.
Yeah.
It is pretty. It's beautiful.
I hate picking favorites of anything. I always say my favorite edible mushroom for foraging is oyster mushrooms because I can find them almost every month out of the year. Not reliably, but you can find them pretty frequently here in DC, and they're delicious.
Yeah.
And just for finding them in the woods, I love the little wax caps. There was one in our game that we just played, I think, with the vermilion wax cap is in Undergrove, and they're just like the super bright colored. They just like pop out in the forest. You see them from far away because they're so bright. Usually red or orange or yellow, like hot colors. They're cool.
That's very cool.
Very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting. You both talked about the tastiness of some of these mushrooms, even though Undergrove isn't necessarily about eating them. So that leads quite nicely onto the next question. What is your favorite mushroom dish?
Oh.
Or how do you like them prepared? Risotto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I love risotto. I love risotto. I love parmesan, mushroom, onion. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Tasty.
I make a decent risotto. Elizabeth's eaten my risotto.
Oh,
yeah.
You've eaten my risotto.
There we go.
And it was good. Often if I'm foraging for stuff, we'll just cook it up straight, like sauteed, because we want to really experience the mushroom.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. Oh, I do have one.
Yeah.
So there's a mushroom called chicken of the woods. That it's called chicken of the woods mostly because of the texture is kind of meaty and stringy almost. And you can marinate it like chicken satay and grill it.
That does sound very tasty.
So chicken of the woods satay with peanut sauce.
All right. Tasty.
Sounds good.
Next question. What's your favorite genre of board game?
I am a sucker for a good engine builder.
Okay, engine builder.
That's definitely what I gravitate to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm an engine builder.
There you go. We have two engine builders.
You guys.
Yeah. Amazing.
Definitely not surprising. And yeah, last question for you both. We're going to be strict here. Can you describe Undergrove in 3 words?
And you cannot say mushroom.
That's even more strict.
3 words. Mycorrhizal relationships. Trading relationships. There.
Trading.
Mycorrhizal trading relationships.
I like it.
Yeah, the trading come up a lot in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth knows
3
how hard
really
it is for me to be
limited.
brief about anything.
True.
I mean, asking me to say something in 3 words is like asking anybody else to say something in 1. Puzzly.
Mm-hmm.
Addictive.
Rewarding. I'll take that. A very addictive and rewarding puzzle. So there you go. That's Undergrove for you. And and that wraps up the interview. And thank you again to Elizabeth and Mark. Really glad to have you, and thank you for joining us. That was so much fun. And thank you, Will, as
Thank
well.
you.
Yeah, thank you for co-hosting. And as I
Absolutely.
say, the game is currently on Kickstarter, so make sure you head over to the page to check out for more information. And if you want to watch the gameplay, you can also head over to Winging It channel. And yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.